Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Pink Sock Reacts. Today we are going to be discussing Halloween H20, and by we, I mean me and Adam Gorak. If he shows up, I think he slept in again, which is fine. We can just discuss it until he shows up. It happens. It's live. Gorak lives in a whole nother country. He lives in Australia. It's like 3 or 4 a.m. there, so it happens. But we are going to be discussing Halloween H20. Great freaking movie. I love this movie. And to explain to you guys when this movie takes place, because it is a little confusing to some people. It takes place 20 years after Halloween 2. Not Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, of course, because this came out before that, but after the original Halloween. The return of Laurie Strode, and we will get into how she survived the car accident she died in, which wasn't mentioned until 4, but we'll that's neither here nor there. We'll just discuss that when I hit it. But before I do that, I'd like to give a few quick shout outs to some friends of mine who have new music and who have podcasts. If I missed you, get a hold of me. We will give you a shout out next week. We have Glazer Girl, who has her lyric video for The Liar's Way coming out on October 28th at noon Eastern Standard Time on the YouTube channel. Also, we have our buddy Ryan Roxie over on In the Trenches, recently interviewed James Michael of 6 a.m. And also our friend Cathy Grant. Sorry, I have like sinuses, so if I stop to swallow or whatever, that's because I'm dealing with some sinus issues and an infection. Also, we have Cathy Grant from Reignite. She recently interviewed Charlie Harper of the legendary band UK Subs, which is awesome. I am so proud of her for that. Such a legendary punk band. I know she's big into punk, and it's incredible that she had him on the show. I'd also like to give a shout out to my buddy Royce Eddings of Royce In The House. He has an amazing show as well, and also my buddy Dan McNeil. He was the founder of Ride for Dime. He's does a lot of incredible work on his channel with Just the Facts. I would like to apologize to those on Facebook. I just realized that my Facebook is set to private, so it should be public now. Without any further ado, we are going to jump into Halloween H20. Unfortunately, Gorak is not with us yet. If he joins later, we will pick up where we are at. So, for any Halloween fan, they already know this, but I will mention it again for those just now tuning in. Halloween H20 takes place after Halloween 2, 20 years after that. So anything that happened with Halloween 3, 4, 5, 6, anything previously after Halloween 2 did not happen with this film. So we fast forward 20 years after Halloween 2. 20 years after Halloween 2, this movie starts off. We see Marion Chambers, who is the nurse that took care of Dr. Loomis up until he died. Dr. Loomis was the caretaker / therapist for Michael Myers while he was in prison. He took care of Michael. He was very close to Michael, but in this movie, he had died. I don't know how long ago he died, but that's neither here nor there. Marion Chambers arrives to her home, and she notices that things are awry. Her door light is broken, and she opens up her door and hears noise in the building. So she freaks the fuck out, like any normal person would, but she freaks out. Sorry, need to close my door. My dad's trying to nap. She opens her door, hears mishaps going on. She runs over to the neighbor's house, bangs on the door, and she's not let in yet. She's knocking on the door. Nobody's answering. She runs around to the side of the house, and that is when she is startled by the neighbor boys. The two neighbor boys, one's wearing a hockey mask, which is a nice little nod to Jason Voorhees. She ends up getting startled by the neighbor kids, and they let her in the house. She explains to them that someone broke into her home. They need to call 911. So one of the kids calls 911. And then they decide, hey, I'm going to go into that house and I'm going to look around. So one neighbor kid stays with her while the other one's in the house rummaging around. So this is a neat little scene. The kid's inside of the house. He has the hockey stick and he's walking around like full blown. This is the closest you're going to get to Michael Myers versus Jason. Is this kid? This kid's walking around. He's not seeing anyone. He goes into one room, and it is presumably the room where she keeps all of her files and shit. I don't know if it's an office room or just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a room that has all these files and pictures and shit, and it's destroyed. And the kid's like, oh shit, this room's destroyed. So he goes into the kitchen. Everything else seems all right. He ends up destroying the kitchen by accident because he hears a noise and hits the light, or not really the light, but the thing where all the knives are or whatever. He hits that and everything falls everywhere. He ends up going outside and telling Miss Chambers, your house is fine. Nobody's in there. You're safe. Presumably, this kid done screwed up. Presumably. No, they did call 911. They said it'd be 10 to 15 minutes before the police arrive. So they end up going home. The kids do. Miss Chambers ends up going into the house. She's looking through all the files and shit that was thrown about, and we see Laurie Strode's file, which is missing. Presumably Laurie Strode had died in a car accident, but we find out that Laurie Strode actually faked her own death. Sorry, I need to take a drink of water. She faked her own death to escape Michael Myers. Now, sorry. Now, Mrs. Chambers' front door ends up open. She goes over to close it. She looks back. Now, you see Michael Myers in the background, but she doesn't. And her back door closes or opens or whatever. Either way, she turns around, freaks out about it, goes out the front door, goes to the neighbor's house, knocks on the door. Nobody answers. She busts into the door and she sees one of the kids with like a skate or whatever into his head. Sorry. If I mess up with my wording, I apologize. I am sick. My brain's all fucking scattered. But he's got that thing in his face. She freaks the hell out like anyone would and goes to run out the door. And then the other kid's standing there and falls on her dead. And then Michael Myers comes out. And thank you, Danny, for tuning in. And anyone else that is tuning in, feel free to comment below. If I don't see it and you're on Facebook, that's why. Facebook, for some reason, is set to private. Some of the comments do go through, some do not. All comments are appreciated. But she sees Michael Myers. She freaks out and starts running. Michael Myers chases after her. They start fighting. She breaks in the window. The cops are showing up and she's screaming, in here, but the cops are in her house. Michael Myers grabs her head and slits her throat and kills her. And then he presumably disappears. The cops show up at the house. They discover the bodies. And then we see Michael Myers leaving in a car. He's able to drive. This did not make much sense to me. It's a great movie overall, but this scene did not make much sense because Michael Myers, according to the other two films, kind of has the mentality of like, what, an 8-year-old when he got arrested. He's just stuck in that mindset, but it's a great add-on. He can freaking drive. I don't know how he learned how to drive because he's in a mental asylum since he was like 8 or whatever, but he's driving. He learned. He probably picked up that skill over the 20 years, but he's driving. Michael Myers has escaped, and he is driving, and he somehow survived that explosion. We don't really find out how he survived that explosion, but he survived the explosion. Now we are reintroduced to Laurie Strode. Now, before we get introduced to Laurie Strode, I'm getting way ahead of myself. The detectives discuss the possibility of it being Michael Myers to one another while investigating the case. One of them says he'd be ancient with a cane and Alzheimer's and shit. And the other guy's like, he'd be my age, which they don't really discuss that detective's age, but he's about in his 40s. If you do the math from the original series, it's close to like 40s, mid 40s. Now we see an intro happen, which I loved this intro. You hear Dr. Loomis talking, and he's talking about Michael Myers and how messed up he was and how he was very quiet and everything. And then it cuts out from that. You see all the case files, pictures of Loomis. This movie is kind of an ode to Loomis in a way. But meanwhile, in Summer Glen, California, Laurie Strode, who has faked her own death to avoid Michael Myers, is now under the name Carrie Kate. I'm not going to be using that name, Carrie Kate. I'm going to be saying Laurie, but just know that other characters, up until she admits to who she is, know her as Carrie. Because it's confusing for me to try to remember her as Carrie, because what I'm used to. But she has a career as a headmistress of Hillcrest Academy, which is a private boarding school. Now, her career is supported by her giving secretary, Norma Watson, and the Hillcrest guidance counselor, Will Bernanan, whom she is in a relationship with, a secret relationship at that, because they work together. But Laurie is far from happy in her current situation because due to the tragic events of Halloween 1 and 2, she has post-traumatic stress disorder, and she believes Michael Myers is going to come back. She has visions of Michael Myers, is haunted in her sleep from Michael Myers, but she can't tell anyone. She feels she cannot tell a soul. Laurie does have a son, John. He knows about her freaking out about Halloween and everything. She tries to keep him safe. Now there is a trip going on, going to a class trip to Yosemite, which we find out her son wants to go, but she refuses to allow him to go because of concern and worries. Sorry, my phone rang. People know I do a podcast and they still call. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to do not disturb. Hopefully it's not a job calling. But she refuses to allow him to go. And then that's when we kind of learn about the dynamic between Laurie and her son. It's an unhealthy relationship. He wants to go out and do his own thing at Yosemite. Well, she wants him to stay and be safe because it's Halloween. And Michael Myers only kills on Halloween. Then we see at a rest stop in Northern California, this girl and her daughter are stopping at this rest stop to go to the bathroom. They go out and they notice a car. That car is the car that Michael Myers stole. Dun, 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 dun. Michael Myers is at that rest stop. She goes in to go to the bathroom with her daughter, and they're sitting there, and the daughter freaks out about a spider in her hair, and the mom's purse gets stolen by Michael Myers. She sees him through the crack. Luckily, she does not pursue him. She just sits there and waits. He goes, steals her car, lets them two live. Now that her car is stolen, the girl and the daughter's alive, unscathed. We don't really hear much about them throughout the movie. Like, that's all we see of them. Now we go back to the college where the classmates who are available to go to Yosemite and some that aren't. I mean, it's the entire class. Laurie Strode is explaining who they know as Carrie, as we mentioned earlier. They're giving information about the trip. A lot of the classmates are talking amongst each other. Several of them are like, I can't go anyway, blah, 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 blah. Of course, John is like, my mom won't let me. They're all discussing all of that. Then we go to the next scene. We learn about a security guard. His name is Ronnie. He's an aspiring erotic novelist writer. He's on the phone with his wife, and John shows up. And John's like, hey, can we please go off campus? It's him and his friend Charlie. Can we go off campus? I got to get my girlfriend some gifts. I will be right back. And he's like, no, that's going to cost my job. And his wife's on the other line yelling at him about it. And he holds the phone up so she can't hear and is like, I will give you this. I will open the gate, but you better not tell anyone I let you do this. So the kids run off. Laurie is now having dinner with her boyfriend, Will, and explains to him the situation with John. She feels like she's losing John. She says, I need a counselor, but I don't think I'm beyond help. Now, Will doesn't know the full story, but she's kind of hinting at this point. And she's asking, well, can you counsel me? And he's like, no, I don't want to counsel you. You have to find your own counselor or whatever. And she says, I'm beyond recovery, I think. And he's like, nobody's beyond recovery. And they're kind of talking back and forth. He gets up and goes wherever he needs to. He fucks off somewhere. And she's asking for another Chardonnay wine. She has a full glass, and the waiter notices, and she's like, now, leaves. Then there's these two kids that are fighting with a sword, a machete outside the window, and it's giving her flashbacks. Well, she ends up leaving the diner. We don't really see anything else that happens amongst her and Will. She leaves the diner and then runs into John and his friend Charlie, and she freaks the fuck out. She's like, what are you doing out? It's Halloween. And he's like, you know what? Your worries are your worries. My worries are my worries. I need to do what I need to do. I need to be an adult, blah, 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 blah. I need to go out on my own. And she agrees to take them back to the campus. Now, before they ran into each other, a little side note that I forgot to add, Charlie and John were stealing alcohol from a local store, and Charlie had it hidden in his pants. So they end up taking them back to campus, but we see like a shot, Laurie's driving. We see that vehicle from the rest stop that Michael Myers stole parked. So he's in town. So next we get a scene of them arriving at the campus. Michael's car is actually following them, parked right behind them. Laurie doesn't see it. Laurie's like, open the gate, Ronnie, open the gate, Ronnie. And he can't hear them. So she gets out. Well, she doesn't get out. John gets out, goes up and is like, hey. And Ronnie comes out and says, sorry, I was patrolling the parking lot. Let them in. Explained to Laurie, I was patrolling the parking lot. And she's like, yeah, but where were you when they snuck out? And he's like, I didn't know they were out. He gave them a death glare. Like, you motherfuckers, you got caught. So the Michael Myers vehicle drives away, leaving them unscathed for now, but he's just kind of stalking like Michael Myers does. Now we enter a whole other scene where Molly, John's girlfriend, is in like a kitchen area of the campus. And there's like this chute. It's kind of like a laundry chute, but I think it's for dishes, where they bring the dishes down from the top area where the party area is down to the kitchen, because there's a set of stairs that, attention to detail, there's a set of stairs that comes down from that area into the kitchen. Now a lot of this movie takes place in this area of the campus. That's why I'm kind of covering the floor plans of it. And then there's a basement where they party later. Anyway, she's in this kind of kitchen area. And then there's this thing that comes down the chute. It's flowers with a map. She follows this map that leads to John. John startles her by hugging her from behind, and he surprises her with this happy Halloween sign. And he's like, we're going to celebrate Halloween this year. I need to look past the trauma of Halloween and whatever. He discusses all that. He says, I want a chance. And he's like, I need to do what's right and celebrate with the love of my life. Meanwhile, in Laurie's classroom, Molly is sitting there. Well, later, I should say, not meanwhile, later in her classroom, Molly sees Michael Myers standing in like a little doorway. And then she gets asked by Laurie, while she's not paying attention, what she thought of the story that they were all reading. Now, Molly's explanation kind of aligns with Laurie Strode's life, or what has happened to her, ironically. But she's explaining the story. You can watch the movie. Whenever you watch it, you'll hear everything that is said, but it kind of aligns with Laurie's life when it pertains to Michael Myers. Then the class bell rings, and then Michael Myers isn't there anymore. The class goes to leave, and this is when... Now, before this scene, as we stated, the Happy Halloween thing, there's going to be a Halloween party that day. Also, that day is when they're leaving for Yosemite. Laurie gives John a permission slip and says, you can go to Yosemite. I will allow you whatever. And John ends up meeting up with Molly right after that. And Molly said, "Hey, I can't wait for the party tonight." And he's like, "Well, I was invited to Yosemite. My mother said I'm allowed to go, and we leave today." And he's like, "And I'm not going." So he throws it in the trash. He's staying at the campus. Now, Laurie and all of them live at the campus. So he's staying at the campus. They sneak in to the basement to party later on that night while everybody left for Yosemite. Now, Laurie Strode and this older teacher's talking and about Yosemite and life. And then she said, "You might need help, whatever. Happy Halloween." Well, later on that night, as I said, the kids are sneaking into the basement, into the kitchen and everything for all of that. Now, a little side note, Laurie doesn't know that John isn't going to Yosemite and has plans with Molly at the campus. Now we see Michael Myers' car on the side of the road as the buses are leaving. And then he approaches the campus. And now we get to I was way ahead of myself, but we see his car come out. And then later on that night, the kids are getting ready for this whole party. And then we see Ronnie on the phone with his wife reading his exotic novel. And then Michael Myers' car comes up to the gate. And Ronnie's like, "Who the hell is that?" And he walks up, he opens the gate. There's nobody inside the car. So he closes the gate. And then he's on the phone with his wife. And we see Michael Myers in the window behind him. Ronnie's talking to his wife, and he's like, "Hey, I hear something. Hold on." Lays it down, looks outside. The car's still there, which he turned off, by the way. He goes back inside. He's like, "What the hell?" He goes to go back on the phone with his wife. He's talking to his wife after he closed the door, and then the phone hangs up. All lines are dead. Ronnie walks outside, and then it cuts to the next scene. He's not killed by Michael Myers in this scene. Now we see Laurie walking through a room, which is presumably where she is living on the campus, and she's turning off lights. She's pouring her wine, and she's drinking her wine. She ends up opening up her door, and Willis standing there, who had the plans for a date later on that night. Now he ends up startling her with flowers and everything. And at this point, it's not the date. This is when he invites her to the date. I got my facts a little mixed up. I apologize. He invites her on the date in this scene. He has like flowers and stuff. And she's like, "Okay, whatever." Now she is walking down the hallway because at this point he and her are not in her house yet. I apologize. My brain is scattered due to this fucking sinus infection. At this point, she's still on the campus turning off lights, and then he invites her on the date. Now he sees someone as he's leaving this room walking, and it's Michael Myers, but he doesn't think anything of it. He continues walking. He ends up going up to the dorm areas to check in on the students, and one of the rooms is Sarah and Molly, who are the girlfriend of John and Charlie. They're in the rooms. He asked, and a fun side note, they were actually watching Scream on their TV. Scream or Stab. I don't know which one they were watching. Same movie. But they were watching that, and he asks, "What are you guys getting into tonight?" And they come up with some messed up, crazy excuse. I don't really want to repeat it on air because for the times it was okay, but now it's canceled material. And they're like, "What would you like to join us?" And he's like, "No, I got to pierce my nipples." And then he left. And we finally see the students actually sneaking into the basement. We knew they were going to. It was hinted at it, but now we get to see it. They're sneaking into the basement for the party as planned. We fast forward. Now Laurie is finally in her house. She's drinking her wine. She hears a knock at the door, and it's Will with a pumpkin, and he's ready for the date. That was kind of a small little scene. They start kissing and stuff, and then it cuts back to the kids. They're stealing food from the college cafeteria, and they are taking it to their little party room in the basement. Charlie says, "I got to get some alcohol," and he leaves. Now, one rule of horror movies, you do not leave. You're stupid if you fucking leave. But he left. But you don't know you're in a horror movie, I guess. Now, fast forward back to, well, not fast forward, but go back to Laurie and Will. Laurie and Will are making out on the couch. Laurie says, I have a confession to make. And this is when she tells him her true identity is Laurie Strode. Her brother killed her family pretty much. And Laurie then ends up freaking out about Michael and is like, oh my God, I got to find out where John is. Whatever. What if he didn't go? And she tries calling and she realizes the phone line's dead. She ends up grabbing a gun and going outside. And then they run into Ronnie, who then says, yeah, all the phones are out. And there's a strange car by the gate. And then they all leave to go see this car by the gate. Then we see the next scene back inside of the basement area. Sarah's like, I'm going to go look for Charlie. He's been gone for a while. They end up running into each other, and then Charlie leaves Sarah behind to find a corkscrew downstairs. Now they're upstairs in the little party, not the party area, but upstairs in the cafeteria type area setting. And downstairs, as I said, is like the kitchen. So he goes downstairs to the kitchen area to find a corkscrew. He grabs the corkscrew and he loses his touch and he falls down. It falls down in the sink. Now the food disposal type sink is what this is. And those give me fucking chills because you turn it on, you can cut your fucking hand off. He puts his hand down to get the corkscrew, and then we see Michael Myers. Now, I thought he was going to turn the food disposal on and it was going to be a crazy mess, but it wasn't. He actually got the corkscrew out, turned around, and ran into Michael. And now we go back to Sarah. We don't see anything that happened to Charlie. It cuts to Sarah now. She's upstairs pacing the room, trying to turn the lights on to no success. And then she sees Michael Myers' reflection outside. And she thinks it's Charlie. So she ends up going downstairs to the kitchen to find Charlie. She's like, what the hell? And she opens up that chute thing that we were talking about earlier. You know, and Charlie actually went down to Michael in it. He didn't go down the steps. He went down in it. But she opened it up and Charlie was in there cut neck and dead. And she turned around and there's Michael Myers. She goes into this little thing and Michael Myers stabs her. She hits the button and goes upstairs. She's crawling on the floor with a stabbed leg. She's all messed up. She's stronger than I am. I don't know if I could have done that. I don't know if I could have fucking pulled that off, but she was crawling with a stabbed leg. Michael Myers comes out and she's like, no. And he puts his leg on the back of her head and starts stabbing her multiple times. And then go back to John and Molly in that little party room. They decide to leave the room to find Charlie and Sarah. They're like, oh, they're probably shagging somewhere. They're probably getting it. They're probably making mac and cheese. For those who know, you know. Well, they're looking for Sarah and Charlie, and they're roaming the hallways. And next thing you know, they enter that little kitchen, not the little like kitchen area that they were both killed in. And that is when they open up a door, like a little closet door, and they discover Sarah hanging from these lights and the electricity and everything else going crazy. And like, what the fuck? And they see Michael Myers in the hallway. Well, at first they see the blood leading up to Charlie, and then they discover Sarah. And then they see Michael Myers in the hallway, and they escape through a window. And they're running the sidewalks, and they decide to call the cops, but they have to find someone to help them call the cops. And then Michael Myers appears out of nowhere. They're all fighting. He ends up stabbing John in the leg. After fighting up a good fight, they both end up escaping again. They run up to this gate, and they have the keys, but there's a bunch of keys, and they're fighting these keys, and Michael's behind them. They end up finally getting into the gate, closing the gate, but Sarah drops the keys. Or Molly, sorry, Sarah's dead. Molly drops the keys, and Michael's like stabbing at him. Now the key is on Michael's side. He picks them up, starts rummaging around the keys, and he finally puts right key in the door. And as he is putting the key in the door behind them that they were pounding on at the time opens up, just miraculously opens up, and it is Laurie and her boyfriend, Will, and they open the door and they shut the door. And as they're shutting the door, Michael's opening the gate, and this scene happens. Laurie Strode closes the door, and her and Michael's face to face for the first time in 20 years. And she's terrified, but she's like, oh, you motherfucker. So she ends up facing her fear that Michael Myers is back. Now, John and Molly ends up explaining that John had been stabbed in the leg, and they end up running the hallways to try to find an escape. John and Molly gets locked inside of a closet by Laurie. She's like, you stay right fucking here. Laurie and Will end up running the hallways, and then they discover an open window. Will is told to go out the window and seek help while Laurie stays behind. And he says, no, I'm not leaving you behind. I'm staying here. Now Will turns around and sees a guy coming through the hallway that he thought was Michael Myers, and everybody would think it was Michael Myers. He starts opening fire, and the guy falls down, presumably dead, blood. It's Ronnie. He accidentally killed Ronnie, the security guard. Then Michael Myers comes out of nowhere while they're grieving up behind Will and stabs him right through the back and holds him up and kills him right in front of Laurie. And Laurie's like, oh, fuck no, and runs away. And she ends up finding John and Molly. Well, doesn't find them yet, but walks up to a closet and is like, come out of there, come out of there. And Michael Myers walks out. And she looks over at him. She's like, oh, shit. And she's showing Michael that it's reverse psychology. I got the wrong closet. He ends up stabbing through one of the closets that he thought was the right one. Smart Laurie knew he would do that. And she's like, haha, got you, motherfucker. And ran to the right closet, opened it up, said, get out. And they all started running. They ended up fleeing the building into the sidewalk again. And they enter Laurie Strode's car. While starting the car, Michael's approaching and there is problems starting. It is a fucking horror movie. That's just how they do it. Michael makes it to the driver's side door, looks at Laurie, and it starts up and they speed off. Now they make it up to the gate and they instruct Molly to drive and go to the Becker's house to call for an ambulance and the police and leave her behind, because she is realizing at this moment that I cannot escape Michael. He has to die tonight. So Molly and John take off. Laurie shuts the gate behind them, picks up a rock and destroys the lock so nobody can escape or come in. And then she grabs an axe. Laurie decides that she's going to go after Michael. She faces him head on like a bad bitch. She's a bad mofo. She's looking through the building. She's like, hey, Michael. And Michael's behind her. He descends from the ceiling and Laurie stabs him with the axe. And he stabs her back. Now, the axe, I think, is in Michael's arm, maybe. He ends up removing the axe and dropping it as she's running away. And he drops it on the floor. Michael then ends up walking around the room, and Laurie is hiding under a table. He notices that she's under the table, and she ends up going from table to table, trying to escape him. She ends up kicking a chair to distract him, thinking that she got out from under that table. And Michael finally gets pissed off and starts flipping tables. And next thing you know, he's all above her because he's flipping all these tables. He realizes the one that she's under, stands over it. He's just getting really pissed off at this point. So Laurie ends up running, grabs a flag and stabs Michael with it, and then gets away again. She's running up the steps. There's a lot of running in this scene. Michael finally gets her into the kitchen. She opens up the drawer with all the knives in it, spills them everywhere, and starts throwing knives at him. And she misses every single time. He goes to stab her. She picks up the drawer. Knife goes through the fucking drawer. And she's like, ah. And she gets away from him again. Because she ends up, if I'm not mistaken, she ends up stabbing him. She uses the drawer to dodge the stab, picks up a knife, and runs away. That's what happens. I have notes because my memory is not the best sometimes. Michael then pursues her. She pops out of nowhere, like Michael Myers style, and starts stabbing him multiple times until he falls through like there's like a ledge area, like in the little party area that where all the tables were, because she went up the steps to the like kind of a lounge area. She stabs him and he falls right through one of the tables. And she ends up going downstairs to check on the body. She removes the knife from his chest and goes to stab him again, but she's stopped by none other than Ronnie. Ronnie is not dead. Our lovable security guard is not dead. Even though he got shot, he survived. I guess the bullet, according to him, just grazed him. So now we see the cops have arrived. Michael Myers is being put into a body bag. Laurie's not happy. She steals a gun from a cop. Is like, throw him in the fucking van. Give me the keys. They gave her the keys. She ends up driving off with Michael in the van. And Laurie's driving. And she sees some moving around in the back seat. She looks back and she's like, God damn it. Michael gets out. Goes to come after Laurie. Laurie slams on the brakes because she knew to speed up. He goes flying through the windshield. She's sitting there waiting. She's like, get up, motherfucker. Get up. So Michael Myers gets up. She ends up hitting him, and he's hanging on for dear life. And she decides, I'm going to risk myself. And she drives off this ledge, flips the car with Michael hanging on to it, and he gets crushed into between the tree and the car. She then, we realize that Laurie actually got out of the vehicle somehow during that rolling because she's in like tree branches and shit. She gets up, she sees Michael crushed and he's still alive. And Laurie's looking at him eye to eye like a bad bitch she is. And she's like, Michael, and I never understood this, how she still has the axe through all of this. But she looks at Michael. Michael has his hand out like, don't kill me. I'm your brother. And she goes to grab his hand too, and she starts to tear up, and then she takes the axe and chops his head off. Movie ends. So that's the movie. That's everything that happened. I'm going to get to a little side notes here in a minute, but that is the movie. I hope you all go and see this movie. Well, it's not in theaters, obviously. It came out in like 98, but it's a great movie. Just keep in mind that it takes place after Halloween 2 and nothing else really happened according to this movie. But here's a little bit of trivia, a little bit of goofs, and then I'm going to go ahead and rank this movie. Unfortunately, Grak's not here. He never made it, which is fine. Grak, I hope you're doing all right, brother. I wish you could have made it. But I'm fine talking about Halloween by myself. But during the scene where Norma is leaving, she stands in front of the car from Psycho, in 1960s film. The music playing in the background at this part is also from Psycho. So that's an interesting nod. So a little bit of a nod from that. Jamie Lee Curtis considered this film a thank you note for her fans. Curtis, without that early career, I truly do not know what I would have done as an actor. After 20 years, Jamie Lee Curtis said that seeing Michael Myers on set still terrified her. She also, I don't think, has seen any of the movies. When she says go down the street to the Beckers, this is supposed to be a reference from the first Halloween. Go down the street to the Mackenzie's house, but the name was changed to Becker, which was the last name of Drew Barrymore's character in Scream. There's a lot of nods to Scream in this movie. A lot. Like they were watching Scream on TV in one of the scenes. Well, I don't think it was Scream, though. I think it might have been Stab, which is the movie in Scream. One of the masks used from Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, was used for the first scene appearance of Michael Myers. So that's an interesting take. There's also a scene where the line, everyone is entitled to a good scare, is stated. It's said by Norma to Laurie. That was originally said by Sheriff Brackett in the first Halloween movie. Also, Jamie Lee Curtis has played Laurie Strode in films released in 6 different decades. Fun fact. 1978 Halloween, 1981 Halloween, 1998 Halloween H20, Halloween Resurrection 2002, Halloween 2018, and Halloween Kills 2021, and Halloween Ends 2022. Crazy, I know. This is also the shortest Halloween movie in the series, with a runtime of only 86 minutes. Now, I'm going to be getting to the ranking very shortly, so a little bit of a drum roll, but let's do a couple goofs, because I think this is cool when there's goofs. Now, one of the goofs is that there's a newspaper clip that is shown at 12 minutes during the whole Dr. Loomis scene. The newspaper clip shown during the opening credits states that Laurie Strode died in a car accident. It says she was the survivor of the Halloween murders in 1968, even though they took place in 1978, 10 years after that. I was wrong. Scream 2 was being played on the TV, not Stab. Scream 2. Also, they misspelled Michael Myers' last name in one of the newspaper clippings. Now for the ranking of this movie before I go. I give this movie, when it comes to a Halloween movie, I give it like an 8 out of 10. It is a great Halloween movie. It is a great film altogether. I'm glad they made this movie. Some people are iffy about the fact that they retconned 4, 5, and 6 because those are great movies as well. But I enjoy it as what it was. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. I really do appreciate all of you guys. I'm sorry if I'm not at my A game today. I am fighting an upper respiratory infection. I am doing my best to keep this ball rolling. Next week, we do have a very special episode of Pink Sock Podcast. Next week at noon Eastern Standard Time, we're going live. We're staying live at noon. We are going to be ranking all things spooky. On there is like a couple thrillers and like horror movies. Those are all movies, but we're not just doing movies next week. That's just a majority of what we're doing. We're going to be ranking our top horror movies. We're going to be stating what we think is the worst horror movie, the most underrated horror movies. We're going to be talking about horror movie musicians, not horror movie musicians, but horror, rock, and metal musicians, and even some blues. We're going to be just discussing all kinds of things spooky because that is on Halloween. So if you guys are available, I truly appreciate you showing up. If not, I totally understand. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate the support. And until Monday, live long, rock hard. Love you all. Peace, love, and happiness.